This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the business psychos and does not reflect the viewpoints of their current or former employers or clients. Thank you.
It's the business cycles, and today we're gonna talk it out. The podcast about what execs shouldn't talk about. Connecting executives and those who aspire. We're here to have a conversation, yeah, we're gonna light the fire. It's the business cycles. Yeah. The business cycles.
Pete, how many times have you run into an office, jumped on a Zoom call, and worked straight through the day until a pang in your stomach made you realize it was nearly 2 p.m.? I did this for decades, usually grabbing whatever food I could find, eating it as quickly as possible, still at my computer, still like reading emails and working, like crumbs all over the keyboard. Most of the office I've worked in have had well-stocked kitchens specifically to encourage employees to stay in the office. And it definitely worked. So, like 3 bags of pretzels like equals lunch. And then on my commute home, I'd work on the train. And then even after I was home, I'd check emails throughout the night. I cannot tell you how grateful I am to have moved beyond this.
Many people do this. There is a generational shift with the upcoming generations less willing to get absorbed in their 9 to 5, but they're still feeling the pressures of hustle culture with gig work and side hustles, especially in the US and quite a bit in the Northeast where you and I are located. We're going to unpack some of the reasons why people do this, but I'm going to jump to the punchline. When we're absorbing ourselves in work without a plan or perspective, it's a form of dissociation. And this kind of behavior isn't serving us personally or professionally.
It's so counterintuitive, but the truth is, like, the harder you work sometimes, the less successful you may become. So today on Business Psychos, we're talking about managing your throttle. So let's start the conversation. Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back. Katie, if I knew then what I know now, I spent the earlier part of my career as a tireless workhorse, like a hulking Clydesdale or Icelandic draft horse, pulling heavy shit for long hours and brutal conditions. When I was younger, I thought acting this way would make me valuable. So I churned out high quality work faster than anyone else for longer periods of time. I felt proud of this masochistic resiliency, even though on some level I knew that acting this way wasn't usually necessary. I have no shortage of vignettes demonstrating how little I knew about managing my personal throttle. I typically worked for several hours straight, often without standing, eating, or even going to the bathroom. I would even be annoyed if a colleague interrupted my flow by chatting with me. I was a machine, except that I wasn't. I was a human being and one who deeply misunderstood the game at the time. I remember taking a high-level job that came with its share of pretty boring administrative tasks. This was related to some of the regulatory environment that I was in. And as part of this role, all operational and financial sign-offs came through me. And there were a lot of them, and on a daily basis. I had offered to start this role earlier than I had even wanted. Oh, yeah, this is another thing. I used to love opportunities to show off my extreme work ethic. So I let my new boss know I had booked vacation to Hawaii, and he suggested we'll hold off moving things over to you until you get back. And I was like, no, don't worry. I'll do it. I didn't even really think through the consequences of that decision. I just wanted to be agreeable and show him how tough I was. So I went to Hawaii and I schlepped my work laptop around through the various islands, getting up at 5 a.m. to support the New York office. And while these approvals did need to be done, they didn't need to be done by me at the time. And in fact, I was so new to the company, I still needed someone to help me with them anyway. So like taking on this work hurt me in a few ways. Firstly, and most importantly, it interfered with my vacation. Starting each morning, on a beautiful Hawaiian vacation while working at your laptop is not a good vibe. And it certainly did not make my partner very happy. It also set the tone with my new work colleagues that I had porous boundaries and didn't protect and prioritize my personal time and family. And finally, it telegraphed to my boss that I was a workhorse and that my value was in productivity, in doing versus knowing. We've talked on the show before about the 3 acts of your career, and here's a great example of the jump from second to third. In your second act, you know how to do stuff and you do it well and quickly. By the third act, it's about influencing and motivating others to do it. It's leadership. I was making a classic mistake by relying on old skill sets instead of leaning into my third act value proposition.
It was always, this is an example where the differences and similarities of our professional lives show up. Whether you're working in a high growth company aiming at becoming publicly listed or having some type of acquisition exit, or a massive organization that acts as a cornerstone in the market, the opportunity to use work to form a counterfeit identity of being worthy and valuable when, like in The Wizard of Oz, you were these things all along. This exists in all work environments. Earlier in my career, I secretly savored the notion that I was the only person who could do what I do. And even more covertly, perhaps even for myself, harbored fantasies that everything would fall apart without me. And while the first part is true, I have a unique ability to do what I do for a company. The reality is that it really doesn't matter. Without me, they'll adjust and create a new version of things that also works. And if it doesn't work as well, nobody really cares. And am I saying I don't care? Absolutely not. I'm going to suggest that we don't lose ourselves in the process. Instead, that we stay focused on how our career supports our larger aspirations and ambitions and don't just become drones. Many years ago, I was working in my first big leadership role, and I would ride the commuter rail to work, truly a people mover. I remember looking up from my phone and peering around the sepia lit interior with all the other people and noticing how joyless it was. Folks with heads down, faces blank or scrunched, body language either rigid or resigned. And I remember thinking, wait, we're the ones who won the lottery. We have the good jobs and money. Why does it look like this? The purpose of this episode? Look up, realize that we did win the lottery, and start behaving accordingly.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
Early in my career, I worked as a field sales rep. I've talked about this before on the show. I had a territory with a list of hospitals and doctors I was expected to call on. I would drive around Boston all day. Because I was in Boston, access to the doctors was extremely challenging. There was open disgust for pharmaceutical reps and the whole commercialization of the industry. There are a lot of movies out now that can help you understand why, but I digress. My goal was to be number one in the company, and I had a Post-it above my little desk in the bedroom of my little shared Brighton apartment that said, I am number one in the country. But I hated the job. Something I don't talk about decades later, but I hated it. I woke up almost every morning feeling a pit of anxiety in my very being. I had the good fortune of being relocated to Boston from Keene, New Hampshire by a big company and paid more than I thought possible at the time. I had no family safety net, no mentorship or guidance. I was already swimming in deeper waters than my peers from New Hampshire, and I was afraid that hating my job, with 40 or so years of a career looming ahead of me, signaled doom. I often felt I couldn't do it a minute longer. How was I going to make it 40 plus years? Well, I worked and worked. I spent hours that the hospitals and offices were closed, designing campaigns, targeting, entertaining doctors, preparing for the next day. I developed strategies that got me in front of doctors nobody could see, all the while never asking for help from my manager because I thought he would be impressed by how independent I was. And as I believe, at the time, like that I was so easy to manage. So I was dissociating through work and completely boxing my manager out. Sure, I achieved my ambitions, but I would later learn that I had my boss's old territory. And not only did I outperform him, he was meeting doctors through me who had been on his call sheet that he had never been able to access when he called on them. The basic math for professional life: don't make your boss feel stupid. What's my point? I have a few of them. One, the job was never going to be sustainable, and the reflex to dissociate through workaholism was not going to solve anything. Though I certainly didn't stop trying for many years and many jobs after that. Number two, my boss was a good guy, but I surfaced insecurities in him. And while he kept offering me opportunities for advancement in the company, he actually didn't like me. He was a really good leader because he didn't let that get in the way of the working relationship. But I was taking things too seriously, and spending a day in territory with me was a drag. And the mistaken belief that the more I showed that I didn't need him, the more he would respect me didn't help. And my insistence on having all the answers blocked me from learning more from him than I did. And in retrospect, he was a brilliant people manager, and there was a tremendous opportunity that slipped through my fingers to learn from him. And three, nothing about the level of achievement I pushed myself to had any meaningful outcome. I mean, the money for an A+ performance wasn't remarkably different than a B+. And advancement didn't really matter because there was no way I was staying in that industry. And then last, I'd say I was like doing too much, in air quotes, as the kids say these days. And I burned myself to a crisp. And so those stories and how that played out are, more suitable for business psychos after dark. So whenever we launch that, how that plays out.
Wow.
Stay tuned.
I love that you bring up your dissociation skills, and I do see them as skills because I think they're pretty foundational to hustle culture.
That's
like our minds and bodies are equipped with tools to alert us to when we need to rest, when we're doing too much, or when we become burnt out. But if you're adept at dissociation, you numb yourself from certainly the first two of those, and then you're like overwhelmed when you wake up one day and you can't move, or you're just like, you can't think. Like, these burnout stories are so common that people let hustle culture eat them up and spit them out. And for some people, it can take months or years to recover if you've let it gone on too long. But I think you also, Katie, brought up another really important point, which is that dissociation, even pre-burnout, obstructs your ability to read signals from others or to self-reflect on your own behaviors. And I think what you said is like, and not to apply this term to you, but like a big one here, and I can relate, it's hard to hear, is that sometimes hustlers can be perceived as assholes, especially by non-hustlers. So like there's the trade-off here that like while money advancement near term are going to be appealing, long term you might be doing more harm to yourself personally from the burnout, but also professionally and kind of setting the tone, like your brand and your interpersonal style.
And we'll be right back. Hey, psychos! Ready to ditch those harsh chemicals and make a real impact on our planet? Alcove's got you covered. Introducing Alcove, your new go-to for eco-friendly cleaning products that actually get the job done. From foaming dish soap to refillable hand soap, each product is crafted to be sustainable, effective. Here's the scoop. Stasia Yefimenko, founder of Alcove, embarked on this mission after years of dealing with allergies and asthma. She wanted a better way to clean, one that kicks out toxic chemicals and single-use plastics, all while keeping your space sparkling. So why not switch to Alcove? Head over to alcove.co and check out their stellar range of products. It's time to make a cleaner, greener choice. Try Alcove today. Your space and the planet will thank you. Use coupon code PSYCHOS15 to get 15% off your first order. That's ELCOVE.co.
So I received a near perfect score on my written driver's test. This was ages ago, of course. I passed, but I missed one question, which of course the perfectionist in me still remembers to this day, on brand. And that question is, when driving on the road, what is the single most important rule of thumb? Anyone remember this one? I said something about being 2 car lengths behind the car in front of you or something like that. Well, the correct answer was go with the flow. This is New Jersey. I can't vouch for other states. Human beings aren't able to work like machines. We have biological and cognitive limitations that factory equipment and AI don't. Research indicates that the human brain operates in cycles of 90 to 120 minutes, known as ultradian rhythms. After this period, cognitive performance tends to decline. So working for around 90 minutes, then taking a break, can help maintain productivity long term. Some experts recommend that knowledge workers do 1 to 2 hours of high intensity work followed by a break. Working continuously for more than 2 or 3 hours is likely to lead to diminishing returns in terms of performance and productivity. In my first big corporate job, I worked for a very lovely woman who used to ask me to give her periodic verbal updates in her office in between our weekly staff meetings. So now listen, I'm going to admit it, I was young and a little cocky. I was running circles around people, and I was defensive about these informal chats, believing them to reflect her lack of confidence in me. Yeah. And as a result, our relationship suffered. And despite my dazzling, at the time, database design work, I didn't do well that year. I remember my dad's advice to me when I complained about what I perceived to be her neediness. He just said, Mary, this is part of work too. If you're being hyper-productive at work, you may be neglecting one of the most important aspects of your job, building and maintaining interpersonal relationships. And if you're in Act 3 of your career, this should be most of what you're focusing on. Now, this is going to vary from role to role, but stepping away from your laptop and taking time to have lunch or coffee with your colleagues is going to be just as, if not more important than anything you do on your computer. And my last point is around the unpopularity of brown nosers. Ever go to school with a student who raised their hand constantly to answer questions or who asked the teacher for extra credit work? If you were this kid in school or grew up to be an adult people pleaser who over-identifies with work, you may find yourself disliked and resented by your colleagues or even your boss. Yes, I said it, your boss. Why would they resent you for taking it upon yourself to work harder than necessary? Because they didn't ask you to. And that is your job, to do what your boss asks you to do. If you are too good, too efficient, and too capable, your boss may actually start to find this behavior as threatening as your peers. All of this is to say and to validate what your mind and body are already telling you. Take care and take your time.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
The optimal work pace and production speed will vary based on individual factors such as personal energy levels, the nature of the work, and overall workload. Crucial to your emotional and cognitive health are regular breaks, good time management, and attention to your own mind and body's cues, which will vary over time. We all have had the experience of running fast for a while, only to wake up one morning and find ourselves surprised and annoyed that we don't have the same energy. We struggle to get out of bed, but push through the day anyway. By evening, we come to realize that, we're sick, we have the flu, we have a headache. Like, being in touch with yourself is important to both your personal well-being and to sustaining high performance over time. Your career is a 40-year marathon, not a sprint. Pace accordingly. There's something about calm, even-tempered executive presence, emotional regulation, and aristocratic presentation, which is tightly entwined with ascending professionally. In fact, I would argue that it transcends into personal ascension too. There's a difference between meeting expectations and rapport building and coming across as being over placating and operating in hyper production mode. The latter sends a message that you're junior, insecure, and subservient to those around you. Regardless of your role, title, or level in the organization, this is not how you want to be seen. So carry yourself with the calm confidence of royalty and operate with measured and methodical grace. The vibrations you send off will make others around you feel at ease, see you as a natural leader, and will help to buffer your energy stores to protect against burnout.
Thanks for tuning in. Did you find this episode interesting? Please take a moment to rate and review us on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but ensures you never miss an episode. Plus, your support helps us reach more listeners and bring you even more great content. Oh, and don't keep the good stuff to yourself. Share the love by sending this episode to the folks in your life who might benefit from it. We love building our community and would be thrilled to have them join us. Can't get enough Business Psychos? Get news, behind-the-scenes content, and random commentary, not to mention pictures of Katie's cat, by following us on Instagram and Facebook at Business Psychos Pod. Thanks again for listening.